And good afternoon, everybody. I'm Ann Vandersteel, and welcome to Steel News. You are now entering the war zone. I am back from several weeks up in North Carolina, where I was working with an incredible group up there, the Remnant Ministry. Fantastic organization held and led by Colonel Phil Waldron and Lieutenant Colonel Doc Pete Chambers and his team of, as we called ourselves, a band of merry misfits. But we were doing very important work up there. And I intend to return next week, in fact, because the situation up there is so underreported and so overwhelmingly bad that it's going to require an all hands on deck approach to really get these people through what has just happened. And I'm a victim of hurricanes many times here in Florida. And I know we have lots of my friends and family that are still suffering from the recent Hurricane Milton and Helene. But I can tell you right now, what happened up there is unprecedented. And we do need to really support the people up there, as well as the people down here in Florida and Georgia, et cetera. So this is going to, and East Tennessee, as a matter of fact, there is a lot more to unpack in all of that. But it is because I've been working up there that I've had the pleasure of getting to know a lady by the name of Beth Moranville, who I actually have had on the show. She did some reporting early on the victims in North Carolina and what was happening up there. But she has introduced me to our guest for today. And we're going to focus in on informed consent and seeking justice for victims of COVID and stolen elections. Imagine that your own government, agency government, again, never was our Constitution designed for the type of government that we've been handed today. But I guess you get the one you get when you don't stand up and do anything about it. And you know me, I'm all about doing something. So we're going to do something today. We're going to get into the lack of informed consent and the repercussions of that as it is applied in COVID and the measures that were used, the death protocol with remdesivir, et cetera, as well as these vaccines, quote, vaccines, which, as we now know, to the Ninth Circuit aren't vaccines at all. And we're going to be seeking justice for these victims. We're going to talk about that, but we're also going to get into a little bit more because my guest, Ed Tarpley, who is an attorney, a defense attorney, based out of Louisiana, phenomenal human being who has partnered up with the former Feds group, their Freedom Foundation, and it's a 501c3, but they've actually announced just recently the filing of a petition for a writ of mandamus with the United States Supreme Court. And this petition actually is now seeking immediate action to protect the integrity of the 2024 federal elections. That's right. But also representing the families whose loved ones were lost due to these bogus treatment protocols, this death spiral when you went into the hospital. We've all heard the horrible stories about the ventilators and remdesivir. So that pandemic scamdemic resulted in a depopulation agenda. So now these families have come together. They're actually standing united, and they aim to ensure that the upcoming elections are free, fair, and constitutional. Want to welcome to the stage now, Ed Tarpley. Ed, great to have you here. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here, Ann. It's a great day, and we really are honored to be on your show.
Well, I'm so honored to have you because, again, you've done some extraordinary work. You've represented some extraordinary people, and you're friends with some really critical people who are unfortunately serving time behind bars because, of course, there is a two-tier justice system. People like Steve Bannon, when he decides to, basically blow off a subpoena, he gets locked up. Peter gets locked up, but apparently Hunter Biden and Merrick Garland and all these others, it doesn't matter if Congress subpoenas them, they don't have to get locked up. We're going to cover that along with J6. We're going to talk about the Fisher case, which was really instrumental in J6. And then we're going to get into why, this misapplication of the justice system, especially when you have Trump's First Step Act out there. So let's start with your petition because this is critical. You've now united families that have been denied informed consent with getting behind election integrity, something that I don't know if our federal government is willing to actually relinquish what election integrity should be.
Well, we believe that the dilution of the votes that take place in a state where lawful voters are casting their votes and contrast that with the voters that are voting in states where lawful protections are not in place is an issue that the Supreme Court should handle. We think that the Supreme Court should order and enforce minimum constitutional standards for our elections nationwide. And what we have in our country is a federalist system, and under the Constitution, each state essentially controls the elections in their own state. And we're all in favor of that because we're all strong supporters of federalism, and we believe that each state ought to exercise the powers that were reserved to the states under the Constitution. One of those powers was conduct the elections. And so what we have is we have 50 different election systems in the state. We have 50 different sets of laws. Well, I guess 51 if you include the District of Columbia. But let's look at how that's working out. In California, we have a state in which not only do they not have voter ID, a law has just been passed to prohibit poll workers from asking someone about voter ID. Well, frankly, that's crazy. And so what we have in the rest of our country, in fact, I'll look at I have the list right here. We have 24 states that require photo ID. We have 11 states that require non-photo ID. And then we have 16 states that require no ID at all. Well, and California was one of those states, but not only do they not require any voter ID, now it's against the law to even ask about voter ID. So that shows you that we have a schizophrenic system, okay, that we have one part of the country doing one thing, another part of the country doing something else. Well, we believe that what happens in a state that does not require voter ID, that affects the votes in other states. And so we think that the Supreme Court should set and enforce minimum constitutional standards, which we believe the very first one should be requiring photo ID. We think that's that's the lowest level. That's the lowest fruit on the tree, if you want to say that. Everybody should be able to agree on that, but apparently we do not have that nationwide. And that's one of the things that we've asked in our petition.
So, again, your schizophrenic is a great word to apply to what our legal system is, because what is legal is not lawful and what is lawful is not legal. And as a strict constitutionalist, somebody who really, wants to, if I had it my way and I could sort of, as Barack Obama says, wave a magic wand, I would wave a magic wand over this entire country and I would strip ourselves of agency government. I would strip ourselves of this U.S. code, and I would get back to the basics of our fundamental constitution, because we have basically corporate statism or fascism, if you will, running the country right now with these U.S. codes and illegitimate legal system that has misapplied the law. In fact, they're creating case law and calling it law. And so we have really bastardized the whole process. And when you compare somebody that says you need a driver's license to prove that you're 18 to buy, a gun, or 21 to buy alcohol, or whatever it is, but you can't identify somebody with an open border like a sieve, and all the reporting we've done with Operation Burning Edge, proving an unbelievable abandonment of Article 4, Section 4 by this regime in power, that you can't ask for an identification to make sure that it's not Tren de Aragua gang members from Venezuela voting in your elections makes absolutely zero sense. So I'd like to hear from your perspective just a little bit about the humanitarian side of this, because these people who've been victimized by COVID, losing loved ones at the hands of a CDC, the Centers for Disease and Corruption, I call it, that literally marched these people to their deaths in hospitals. Thank goodness for the state of Michigan. I'm sure you're aware they have now gone after the manufacturer of remdesivir, and anybody who prescribes remdesivir will be held liable criminally for anybody that's harmed or killed. They're still getting away with it. And so how are these people from a mental side coming to the terms where they are finding the strength to stand up and say, no, we want IDs for election because it matters. Your elections have consequences, a la the COVID pandemic we just witnessed and lived through?
Well, it's the lack of transparency, and it's the fact that in the COVID pandemic and with the imposition of the hospital protocols in the hospitals by the federal government, people were forced to take remdesivir. There was a lack of warning, a lack of notice. People weren't made aware of the risk. It was a heavy-handed government response that took place, which we know resulted in the deaths of thousands and thousands of people. And yes, one day I think there will be accountability. It hasn't happened yet, but I hope it will happen. I hope that's coming. And so how does that transfer over into elections? Well, it's very simple. I mean, we have to have transparency. We have to know that the votes we're casting are being counted. We have to know that the votes that have been cast are being properly tabulated. We have to know that that no votes of illegal aliens are being counted, or that someone who doesn't even live in your state, but maybe lives in a foreign country and has requested a ballot and has sent it in from overseas and claimed residence in your state, and lo and behold, you don't have any way to prove that, or if you're not proving that, then that vote is coming in and that's affecting the overall total of votes. So we have all of these issues that are out there. There's so many issues regarding election integrity. Everywhere you look, there's an issue. And the issues are in every state. The issues are nationally. We have a case pending before the Supreme Court out of Arizona right now about whether or not Arizona can implement the law they passed to require that a person registering to vote prove that they're an American citizen. Well, that should be a no-brainer. I mean, really, we're having to litigate something as simple as that. But yes, we are. That's at the U.S. Supreme Court right now. So there are other issues that are in the pipeline from different states. And I think that what the remdesivir widows and all of those that have suffered as a result of the medical tyranny that we experience, I think that all of those people are the ideal plaintiffs because they've already suffered
That's right.
from government abuse and the misapplication of the law and a tyrannical regime that basically forced them to receive this sort of medical treatment. And yes, they are the ideal plaintiffs. They've already suffered from a lack of transparency, a lack of shall we say, a fair treatment and fair dealing from the government. And they, I think, stand forthright to be a plaintiff in asking for the government to ensure election integrity for all of us.
Amen. Well, I'd like to at least pay homage to these 7 widows: Cheryl Martin, Inez Delfico, Sharon Burns, Regina Capelli Gargione, Nancy Best, and Jeanette Thur and Brianna Ross. They all lost their husbands to the COVID protocols during the pandemic. And the fact that they're able to, bring their husbands' names, to life again: Stephen Gilbert Martin Sr., Otto Butch Mooring, Michael Barnes, Frank Gargione, Robert Best, Joseph Thur, and Jason Christopher Ross. They are now going to be forever tied to the justice that they're trying to bring with informed consent, but all, walking in step together to say, we demand better from our federal government and we demand better from the state governments, which are, supposed to run elections. And frankly, the states should be, an ID for an election should be a no-brainer. Because how do you have a country when you don't have identification if you belong in this country? And that's the height of foreign interference when you have a flood of illegals, many of whom are members of these horrific gangs that are here to do nothing but butcher you and to change the face of the electorate because they're working in hand with our own federal government agencies. I mean, let's face it, Alejandro Mayorkas is a communist, and he was happy to have an open border policy at this point and allow the communists to infiltrate our country. So God bless these women, and our sincere prayers and heartfelt condolences to the loss of their incredible husbands who needlessly died at the hands of this corrupt regime and the Center for Disease and Corruption itself at the height of all of it. It's just, if we can make something good out of something bad, let it be this. Let this be the legacy that they leave to protect our country so that this never happens again, right? And we can hang our hat on that.
Well, the former Feds Group Freedom Foundation is composed of thousands of people who have suffered as a result of the hospital protocols and the COVID mandates and everything that took place in that terrible time. The effect of that is going to be felt for generations. I mean, we don't really know what the ultimate effect is going to be. We just know that people have suffered, that people died, and that someone must be held accountable. And I believe that we will see accountability come. I think that's coming. And I think as more and more people are aware of what took place with the hospital protocols, the hospital COVID, the remdesivir, the ventilators, everything that took place, I think as more and more people find out about that, then there will be a increasing cry for justice and accountability. So let me just say this, that with regard to the elections, the issues that we are discussing and transcend this election. I mean, these that are not going to go away. And we have to keep this front and center. I mean, if our elections are not sacrosanct, if we cannot have faith that our votes are being counted properly, and that the person who actually receive the most votes is the person that wins the election. I mean, these are simple things. And why is this so complicated? Why are we having such a difficult time with this? And I submit to you that it's because of the overreach of the government. It's because of the administrative state. It's because of the bureaucracy. It's because of corruption that we find at every level of government. I think it was Thomas Jefferson that said that eternal vigilance is the price of liberty.
Right.
Eternal vigilance is the price of liberty. And that is so true. And it's true at every level of government. In your city council, your county commissioners, your state legislature, and of course your congressional representatives. In other words, local, state, and federal, all levels of government can be corrupted unless good people stand up, get involved, and fight for what they know to be true and just.
That's right.
So that's the message of what the former Feds Group Freedom Foundation is giving to everybody. Stand up and be counted. Let your voice be heard. We must not be silent. We can no longer be silent. And will you be attacked? Will you be singled out and picked on? Yes, you will be, because that happens to everyone that takes truth and justice. That happens to everyone. So let me tell you something. I've used this great verse from the New Testament a lot, and our Savior, our Lord Jesus Christ, said that in this world you will have tribulation, but be of good cheer, for I have overcome the world. And so that's my admonition to everyone. Be of good cheer, for he has overcome the world. And so as we go forward with our fight for truth and justice, we do so from a position of righteousness. We're doing this for the right reasons. It's not for us. It's for our children and our grandchildren, everyone that comes behind us. Because if we want to leave a free country for them, we have to engage in the battle now. We have to fight. And that's why this is so important, Ann. And that's why I so appreciate what you are doing with your reporting and everything that your show represents. We have to shine the light on everything. And
that's right.
Let people know the truth.
Absolutely. So let's shift a little bit, because and I'm going to come back to close with this petition, because I really do want people to engage and to get there. And by the way, the links for where you can go to sign this petition, it's free, doesn't cost you anything. If you want to make a donation to them, I'm sure they'll take it. But here's the deal: we need all hands on deck to fight this behemoth, this monolithic demon called the federal government, which has gone completely out of control, and we allowed it on our watch, everybody. So, everybody take your lumps and realize we all played a part in allowing what's going on in that swamp to continue, because we continue to not stand up and do what we need to do, which is tell them to go pound sand. They work for us. So please follow the link on this ticker streaming below to sign this petition. And it's going to be streaming on the show the whole afternoon here. So I'd like to shift a little bit to J6, because you did represent Stewart Rhodes, and the Fisher case that through the Supreme Court has a role in all of this. You're still representing some other J6ers right now, and there's people getting arrested every day. They're getting and it's just happening, and nobody's reporting on it because nobody knows it's happening. They just get feds show up, flash bang, no knock warrants, and away you go. I mean, this is the state in which we live in. It's a, police state, essentially. So can we kind of shift to the Fisher case and walk us through what you're doing right now? And if there's anybody you want to highlight, we can certainly put them up as well.
Yes, absolutely. Well, of course, I am one of 4 attorneys for Steve Baker, my friend who is a journalist with Blaze Media. And Steve also is a native of Shreveport, and I'm from Louisiana. Steve's from Louisiana. So we've become good friends, and he covered the first Oath Keeper trial in September, October, November 2022. And that's where Steve and I met, and we became friends. As you said, I represented Stewart Rhodes in the first Oath Keeper trial. I was one of 3 attorneys. He had two other attorneys from Dallas, Texas. So I was a part of his legal defense team in the first Oath Keeper trial. And as you know, Stewart was found guilty of seditious conspiracy along with Kelly Meggs from Florida. And Stewart received an 18-year sentence. At the time that he was sentenced, I said to the press that Stewart Rhodes was not convicted because of anything he did. He was convicted because of the things he said. And the reason I made that statement was because there was no evidence to show that there was ever a plan to enter the Capitol. Stewart Rhodes never went in the Capitol. Stewart Rhodes never committed any violence. Stewart Rhodes never destroyed any property. But yet Stewart Rhodes was convicted of seditious conspiracy and sentenced to 18 years in federal prison. And his case is under appeal right now. But what's the point of this? The point of this is that in the January 6th prosecutions that have been led by the Department of Justice in the last 3.5 years, they have concocted a false narrative that this was an insurrection. It was not an insurrection. It was a riot. There were some people there that were up to no good. There were people there that came there that day to do things that were illegal, to commit mayhem and violence. But it was not the Trump supporters. They were provocateurs in the crowd, and that's a real problem because we don't really know anything about them because the Justice Department hasn't really pursued them. But let me just say, Stewart Rhodes was convicted based on a false narrative, and I believe that that Stewart Rhodes will eventually be vindicated because under the Constitution, you have a right to free speech, and essentially what the government did is they prosecuted Stewart Rhodes and others because of what they believed and because of what they said, more so than what they did. Now, did some people go into the Capitol? Yes, they did, and they should not have done so. No one should have gone into the Capitol. And when Stewart found out that a handful of Oath Keepers did that, the first thing he said was, well, that was stupid. You made a big mistake. You shouldn't have gone in there. And so we know that this one act has been used by the federal government to really hammer these people. And what we've seen the Department of Justice use a tactic which is known as overcharging. In other words, they have added charges. They have thrown the book at these people, and it's excessive, it's cruel, and it's unnecessary. Those that committed criminal damage to property, those that were engaged in a violent act with the police, they could have been prosecuted for much lower offenses than they have been. I was a district attorney for 6 years, and I know what that's like. I know that the district attorneys and prosecutors have the power of discretion. You don't have to prosecute the most serious offense. You can find an offense that fits the crime, that fits the actual facts. But what we've seen the Department of Justice do is they have gone out and they've arrested everybody they could. They've thrown the book at them, and they've asked for the most severe sentences in almost every case. In fact, even in our case, the 18 years that Stewart Rhodes got, as bad as that was, the federal government wanted more. And so we've seen that happen over and over again. Why have they done that? Why has the Department of Justice used this sledgehammer against these people? And by the way, who are these people? These people are just regular people. These are working people. These are people from humble backgrounds all across America. I contend,
that's right.
Let me just say parenthetically, I contend that if they all been graduates of Princeton and Harvard and Yale and Cornell and Brown, that none of them would have been prosecuted. Okay.
100%. 100%.
Because of who they are and where they are. These are simple working people. They don't have any money. They don't have any influence. They don't know any powerful people. These people are the people that they can crush. And that's what the federal government has done. And that to me is one of the worst things that has happened, because they have taken advantage of the status of these people, who they are. So I'm just here to say that what we saw in our trial in 2022 was a false narrative that the government spun, and they essentially made the Oath Keepers scapegoats for what happened, instead of the fact that they were not they were there legally. The few that went in the Capitol should not have done that. But we do know that what the government has done in concocting the false narrative that this was an insurrection is false. Now, so where does that leave us today? Well, it means that people are still being arrested. People are still being brought into Washington, D.C. And I think this is going to continue until the Biden administration is over.
Oh, without a doubt. Without a doubt. They're going to continue, because at this point, I see them as a dying caged animal that knows that they're cornered. They know that the masks are off. We know all the crimes they're committing. I'm sure we're going to find more crimes, but the people are now waking up to the crimes that we have a actually a transnational criminal organization running our country at the moment, because I don't see any difference between the TDA and the USG, shall we say. But
Well,
and I want to say this: you're very brave, because I know to pass the bar is not an easy thing to do, and they're stripping people from their bar licenses. I mean, and they're attacking lawyers. Look at John Eastman, look at Rudy Giuliani, and so on and so forth. So the fact that you're out here swinging from the vines and punching the way you are, literally with your words, is fantastic, and I applaud you. And I'm proud to know you, Ed, because it's just a beautiful thing you're doing to stand up for the people to the point that don't have the means or the connections, and yet they're the ones that are being picked on, because it's easy, like shooting fish in a barrel. It's easy targets.
That's exactly what it. Two quick comments. One about the Fisher case. The former Feds Group Freedom Foundation filed an amicus brief in the Fisher case. And why did we do that? And here's why. Because the application of the 1512C2, that's the statute that was used, that was passed in the wake of the Enron scandal to deal with the spoliation of evidence. What the DOJ did is they took that statute and they stretched it so that they could encompass conduct that was lawfully permitted, constitutionally sound conduct. And what was that? Well, it was the ability to petition the government for a redress of grievances. That's right in the First Amendment. That's one of the 5 freedoms that we have protected in the First Amendment. And what happened with the Department of Justice, they expanded it to say that these people were interfering with an official proceeding, that they were trying to interrupt and influence an official proceeding, and they used this law to prosecute them with. Well, fortunately, the Supreme Court threw it out. They threw out the convictions under 1512C2. Well,
there's still people that are sitting in prison right now that haven't, even though these have been thrown out, they're still sitting there. Have all been released? Because I'm not aware of that yet.
That's true, though. They have not been all released. And that's one of the things I was going to point out, that Chief Justice John Roberts said in the opinion that if the court was to adopt the interpretation of the Department of Justice, that anyone who lobbied their legislator, anyone who went to try to influence a proceeding, an official proceeding, your state legislature, Congress, your local city council, you could be, prosecuted under their application of the law. That's lunacy. That's just like way out there. And so
it's making up. It's legislating from wherever you are.
That's right. Well, even John Roberts said, "Look, no, this is not right." And of course, the Supreme Court said that this is overbroad, that this application is wrong. And that's exactly what we argued in our brief. The former Feds Group Freedom Foundation, we filed our amicus brief, and we pointed those things out. Because guess what? What if we wanted to go and protest at a hospital board meeting, or we wanted to go and protest at the local county government about some of these issues taking place in the medical system? Well, if 1512C2, if the application used by the Department of Justice was used, guess what? You could have been prosecuted for that. So we had a reason for filing our amicus brief, and thankfully, praise God, we were victorious. I mean, all those that filed the amicus briefs, there were 10 of us, 10 of them filed. We were one of 10, and we were very, very, very excited about the victory. So that's the Fisher case. But you're absolutely right that the Department of Justice has not handled all the people that were convicted under 1512C2 the same way. Some charges have been dismissed. Some people have been let out of prison, but other people have not. And the Department of Justice have tried to effect a workaround to continue to prosecute people under 1512C2. So in any event, it's a mixed bag right now, and we'll have to see how it's all going to work out. But right now, your statement is correct that people are still being people are still being held in prison who are convicted under this and have not received any relief based on the Fisher case. One other thing I would like to say, in the same line as the Fisher case, is what happened with our friend Steve Bannon and Peter Navarro. Absolutely shameful that the
disgusting
government put in prison Peter Navarro and Steve Bannon, who is still in prison as of this moment. One of the worst things that's ever happened. It's such an obvious selective prosecution. The fact that the DOJ went after these two men to convict them and put them in prison, when the DOJ never did that to Eric Holder or anyone else that's ever been found to be in contempt of Congress. Just a shameful thing, a stain on the criminal justice system in our country, I believe, because there's no question in my mind that Peter Navarro and Steve Bannon are and were both political prisoners. They were there simply because of who they are and what they did, and the fact they defended President Trump.
So if we can discuss the fact that President Trump actually got the First Step Act passed, one of the few pieces of legislation he actually was successful in getting done, because by all stretch of the means, I have all affection for President Trump. Truth be told, I used to work for him in the 90s, and I thought he'd be a great president. And so I was thrilled when he decided to make that leap of faith and jump into this disgusting political sewage sausage making business. But he effectively was a benevolent dictator, having to do everything through executive order because he didn't have a Congress that was representing the people to work with. So fortunately, the First Step Act was passed, and it did a lot of good. In fact, it did so much good that Chicago owes a debt of gratitude to all the ex-cons that can now vote, because they're all voting for Trump, number one. And number two, they're actually the only law and order you're finding in the streets, protecting the families from the wild Tren de Aragua gangs that have now descended upon the city and suburbs of Chicago. We're talking about 2 million ex-felons, by the way, that are now out and or ex-cons, I should say, and now can vote and are organizing for good, which is absolutely fantastic. I want to shout out to my good friend Tyrone Muhammad for all the work he's doing with his ex-cons up there. But if we did not have that legislation, we'd probably be in a bigger pickle. But apparently that legislation seems to not apply to Steve Bannon for some reason. What's that about?
Well, I think it's about the Bureau of Prison dragging their feet and not wanting to help Steve Bannon get out of prison early. I mean,
isn't that a lawsuit waiting to happen? I mean, I know it's not going to make a hill of beans by the time you get a lawsuit. Steve will be released, but will there be maybe a financial remuneration for Steve that, perhaps he was held past his, sell-by date and he should have been sprung from the joint, as they say already?
Well, Judge Carl Nichols issued a ruling, I think it was yesterday, about whether or not the First Step applied to Steve Bannon. And I think there had been a motion filed by his attorneys to have him resentenced, okay? And they thought that if they had him resentenced, that then that would make it easier for him to take advantage of the First Step Act. And so Judge Nichols denied the motion for him to be resentenced. And of course, it seems to me, and I didn't have a chance to review their motion, but it seems to me that the First Step should have applied to him in any event, okay, whether he was resentenced or not, that under the First Step Act, he would have been entitled to a small diminution of his sentence. Now, I think his total sentence was 120 days. So he would have only gotten relief for about, 9 or 10 days. So it's been a very small amount. But if you're in prison, you're in prison. Okay, so every day counts, and so it's just unfortunate that the Bureau of Prisons has not been cooperative with his lawyers in trying to implement the provisions of the First Step Act so that he could leave prison early. So, look, I don't know if we know the whole story about why this has not worked out the way it should have, but it seems to me that he should have been able to take advantage of the First Step Act, and that the Bureau of Prisons, for whatever reason, did not go the extra mile in seeing that it was applied to him, that he was allowed to leave early. I think that under the provisions of the First Step Act, he would have been released to home confinement, which means he would have been able to have returned to his home in Washington, D.C. So in any event, it's just another sad story. It's just another tragic story of how our justice system is not working,
That's
and
right.
and also how it's being used unfairly to target people who are the political opponents of the current administration. I mean, what else can you say? I mean, here are two people, Peter Navarro, one of the leading economists in the country, top advisor to President Trump, and then Steve Bannon, I mean, one of the top political strategists in the nation. Uh, and how in the world could you not see that the Biden Harris administration targeted these people to take them out of circulation, to
That's
take them
right.
off of the airwaves, and it is shameful. It is tragic. It is wrong. And you know what? It is not something that should be happening in a great nation that venerates the freedom of speech and the
Right.
freedom of assembly and all of the freedoms that we enjoy under the Constitution. Why are we doing this to our fellow citizens? It is such a shameful thing. We've got to
It,
be in prayer. We've got to be in prayer for our country, because only
and
God can really turn this around. And
that's so true. That's
where
so
we
true.
are is tragic.
And it sets a very dangerous precedent because the polls that are coming out, and I follow Seth Keshel closely.
He's
I'm in a
very good.
couple. He's very good, and I'm in a couple of chat groups and with
Yeah,
him, and he's bringing back data that really is terrifying to the left right now because President Trump, by all effect, is trouncing Harris all over the place, and I mean big numbers, but we don't want to, knock on wood, because again, we know what they do, right? They can flip vote machines and flip votes in machines. They'll print extra mail-in ballots. They've done a lot of stuff. I think that, we have so many good poll watchers now. We have eyes on everything because we've now seen what they've done. We've allowed them to steal a couple of elections, 2020 and 2022. We know the playbook, and they don't really have a new thought or a new idea. They just recycle the stuff they know that works. So now that we know what they're up to, I think it's going to be a little bit more difficult. However, it doesn't mean that they're just not going to all out do a fraud and see if they can't read J6 us and do that whole playbook again, because they know what works. And now they've infiltrated the country with millions of illegals that are here really waiting for a phone call, their go time. All right, you know what? They're getting a little loud over here. Let's go start some problems over there, and let's perhaps maybe initiate martial law because we're not going to release power. That all being said, the dangerous precedent is this: if Trump wins, right? If he wins, should they be an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth? Should we treat them the same way, or do we just take the high ground and resort back to and default back to this marvelous document called the Constitution for the United States and live by this and deliver law like it is supposed to be delivered? Or do we just toss them onto an island, let them sort themselves out amongst themselves, because they're all heinous criminals? I don't know how many will survive. How would you approach this?
Well, let me just say, as a Christian, the Bible teaches us not to take personal vengeance.
Right.
The New Testament says, "Vengeance is mine; I will
Saith
repay."
the Lord. Right.
And you know that, and I know that. So I don't think we have to take personal vengeance against anyone. But let me just say, we are a nation of laws, and we do have the law in effect. And I think that if people have violated the law, they need to be held accountable. So I think that there is a place for investigations, and if investigations indicate criminal wrongdoing, that should be taken to a grand jury. And if the grand jury decides that charges are warranted, then charges could go forward. There are systems in place to handle these things. And I think that in places where corruption was so obvious and blatant, that it needs to be investigated. And so yes, so my answer to
Yeah.
that is that we balance what we do as Christians, in how we treat people, but as citizens of a great republic, we have laws. We are a nation of laws and not of men, and we should follow the law, and people should be held accountable. So that's the way I see that. I think there has to be a balancing that we have to go through. Everything has to be done fair and honorable and transparent and open. But there is a way to do that, and I think that people should be held accountable. So that's my answer to that question.
Fair
I,
enough.
I think in the day in which we live, we should treat people with fairness. Even if we have not been treated with fairness, we should treat others with fairness. And that's one of the reasons why, and I have called for Speaker Johnson to appoint a new January 6th committee. Now, I don't know if he will do that or not, because the January 6th committee that investigated January 6th was not a real committee. We know
No,
that.
no.
So what we need to have answers to what happened on January 6th. And I think that until we have a real committee with Democrats and Republicans on the committee, both have staffs and they can both question and cross-examine witnesses, I don't think we'll ever get the truth of it, because guess what? Chris Wray, the director of the FBI, he was never called to testify before the so-called January 6th committee. Speaker Pelosi was never called to testify before the January 6th committee. I mean, think of that.
And they had a major hand in what happened that day, right?
Absolutely. Mark
Yeah.
Milley, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, never called to testify. Ryan McCarthy, the Secretary of the Army, never called to testify. I mean, why wasn't the National Guard allowed to be there? Why didn't the Pentagon respond to what President Trump wanted? I mean,
what about Muriel Bowser? What about the mayor of
Muriel
DC?
Bowser, that's right. You can find her letter. The letter she wrote to the Secretary of Defense is on the internet. You can see it, where she said, "I don't want uniformed troops on the streets of Washington, D.C." So the fact is that all these things should be checked into. All these things should be investigated. There should be a real investigation of what happened on January 6th. And I think that until we know that, until we do that, we will never have the answers. And my hope and prayer is that my friend Mike Johnson, the Speaker of the House from Shreveport, Louisiana, that he will have the courage to impanel a new January 6th committee, and let's ask the questions, and let's find the truth about what really happened on January 6th.
Well, I'm going to have to say this because you brought his name up. As easy as it is for him to send money to Ukraine, this should be a priority. I mean, it really should be. And we're sending money overseas, and we're not taking care of Americans in our backyard. And that, to me, is just absolutely abhorrent and criminal, just downright not Christian.
Not only that, and we still don't have all the video from January 6th. Okay.
No, we don't have all that either.
It all has not been released. It should be released. So I'm calling upon him today, right now on your show, and I've said this many, many times, but I'm just saying, look, we need to have a new January 6th committee established after the election under the new Trump administration, and let's let Congress, both Democrats and Republicans, not like the last committee, Democrats and Republicans, both go at it with their own staff, with their own lawyers, and let's ask the questions and find out what really happened.
Amen. I'm with you 100%. And so it brings us all back to where we started, which really is, making sure that we are getting informed consent in everything, because we are not being informed, and we certainly shouldn't be consenting to anything that we're not getting the truth about or the whole information. And so to these widows who have stepped forward to engage in filing this writ of mandamus, to get informed consent and to ensure that our elections are fair and free, and that we, cover the waterfront. I'm going to actually I wonder if I can even share this document on the screen, that they want voter identification requirements, paper ballots and hand counting, publicly observable verification procedures, as well as a suspension of certification prohibiting any state from certifying its presidential electors if they fail to comply with these constitutional safeguards. This should be sort of like a no-brainer. To be honest, this shouldn't even be a subject that we have to debate or discuss. It should be, show me that you're legally here to vote, and we'll allow you to vote, that you're lawfully in this country, and we'll allow you to, to register to vote and be a citizen and vote. But that doesn't happen. In fact, they're doing everything they can in particularly these deep blue states, to make sure that never happens, because, they don't want to lose control. And right now we have a corporate statism, corporatocracy running this country. And that those U.S. codes, if I had my druthers, I'd set a match to them all. But, who am I? Just a voice out here in the wilderness.
Well, you are a very powerful voice and a strong voice and a brave voice. And I want to tell you, I appreciate everything you're doing. Let me just say that whether the Supreme Court gets to hear our case or not remains to be seen. But I will say this, that the issues that we've raised in our petition transcend the election. Issues of election integrity will not go away. And we have to work to make sure that we have integrity in our elections. look, let me tell you what, it's the last bulwark we have
That's
to
right.
protect freedom in this country. If it's the one thing that they can't take away from us, that is our right to vote. It's the one thing that every citizen, no matter what walk of life, no matter where you come, no matter whether you live in a mansion or a house trailer, it doesn't matter. You get the right to vote. And when you walk in that vote that day, you cast your vote. Your vote is just as important as the president of the New York Stock Exchange. I mean, the fact is that everybody is the same on election day, and our votes should be counted the same. They should be tabulated the same, and we should be able to trust that our elections are fair and honest, and no one is doing anything to dilute my vote or your vote or the vote of anyone else. And so ultimately, it's about voter dilution. It's about the fact that we think that what's happening in California is affecting the votes of the people here in Louisiana, the people in New Jersey, or wherever you may live. We need
Right.
to make sure all of our votes are counted the same way and they have the same value, because every vote counts and every vote's important. So these
That's right.
issues will transcend the election, and this is not going to go away. I'm telling you, this is going to have to be dealt with one day. And I'm hoping that the Supreme Court will have the courage to step up and do it.
Well, we're going to find out in short order, aren't we? We've also got the United Sovereign Americans working on their, they've got 9, I think, states with TRO lawsuits filed, of which some they've won, some they haven't. I think they're looking for an expedited entrance into the Supreme Court. Their whole strategy is their lawful strategy, legal strategy is civil rights violations when your votes are disenfranchised by other voters that are either dead, illegal, don't exist, moved, what have you. And so I think that's another great strategy to, again, call attention to the entire system is broken. So, but we have all the evidence, and now we can lawfully walk it into the Supreme Court with standing on a civil rights case. So, there's great work being done by your organization, what you're doing with the former Feds group, the work you're doing on behalf of the J6ers is just absolutely exemplary. And I'm very grateful for that, because I talk to these folks on a regular basis. I get phone calls, and I have friends right now that are going to be getting their day in court here starting next month. And they're nervous because they know how this ends, but you know what? They're resolute. They don't want to plea out because they know that this is wrong. Now, some can afford to do that, some can't. And that's a personal decision. And I respect whichever way people go. I mean, my, friend Simone Gold, Dr. Gold, pled out because she has a business to run, and she couldn't spend 3 years in jail. So it's, for a misdemeanor, for trespassing. This is the irony of the whole thing. It's just disgusting. It's a complete misapplication of law. And it's egregious, and it's punitive, and it's designed to scare people and put us back into our little corners and say, thank you, sir, may I have another? And just pray they don't look at you another day and walk away. So Ed Tarpley, what's the best place for folks to follow you? I know you're on X at Ed Tarpley, but where else can people find you? Websites, where else?
Well, I mean, I have a public Facebook page, Ed Tarpley Facebook. And so they can follow me there. But I'm on X, and those are the 2 places on social media.
Great.
Let me just say this: it's been an honor and a privilege to be on your show, and just like to encourage all your listeners to continue to pray for our country, pray for Trump, pray for wisdom and favor and protection, and I just believe that God is not through with the United States of America, that we are a beacon of light and a beacon of hope for the whole world. All that we've been through, and the turmoil and the injustice that we have seen in recent years, I believe that our people will rise to the occasion, and that we will do what's right to restore justice and integrity and fairness to our country. So let's just continue to do that, and we're going to fight the good fight, and trust that God's hand will be upon us. Because, this is not about us, and this is about our children and grandchildren and all those generations that are coming behind us. Because if we don't stand now and do what we are doing in the time that we have, because we're in this time, this is our time. This is our time to stand. This is our time to do what we know is right. And I believe that we will. And I see thousands and thousands of people answering the call and taking the stand nationwide. So I think great things are ahead. And And look, and let's pray for Steve Bannon that he gets out soon. I've missed hearing Steve, and I know we're all pulling for him to
Yeah.
get out there as quick as he can. But again, thank you so much for having me on today.
Ed, it's been a pleasure, and thank you so much. And we'll be following what's going on with Steve. We'll be following the cases that you're involved in, and please check in because we want to get updates regularly to keep everybody informed. This is very important work that you're doing. Thank you so much.
Thank you. God bless. God bless.
God bless you. What an extraordinary man. What a pleasure to have him on. So full of life, a godly man, of course, and someone who's actually still standing with all of us. He sees us as one of the people. He's one of the people, and he's really trying to call attention and get the federal government to come to heel and be, should we say, submissive to we the people, because in fact, they all do work for us, although you would never know it by what is going on today. We are living in through totalitarian, fascist, authoritarianism, complete takeover as we descend into the pits of hell of communism at this point. And it's really quite startling to see all this happen in real time and to watch people that I know and that I bumped into Steve Baker, by the way, the journalist with Blaze Media. I bumped into him that day at the FEMA camp when I was live last week. He was there as soon as I concluded my live. I turned around and who was standing next to me? It's Steve Baker with his Blaze Media lanyard on. It was, again, people are out trying to do real work and expose what's really going on, get to the truth, and yet we are being punished by the federal government. So shout out to you, Steve Baker, over at Blaze for still showing up despite the fact that, you're facing your own, should we say, egregious regime punishment by the powers that be. All right, we're going to take a quick commercial break. When I come back, I'm going to close out with a couple of thoughts. But I figured before we go to commercial, you probably need to hear from Steve because it's been a while.
What the fuck did you do to stop it? Here's what he did to stop it. Nothing. You know why they did nothing? Because it's too fucking hard to do it. They're gutless. The reason this country in the West is in the shape it's in is because the conservatives who talked a good game about doing better didn't have the balls to sit there and fight and say no. This is why you have moms going to school boards to throw this pornography out. The reason we're winning in the United States, we're not depending upon a conservative elite who are gutless and feckless. We're depending upon mothers and fathers and school boards. We're depending upon working class people who are taking their extra time to go to precinct strategy because they said, hey, we're prepared to stand and fight and not let our country be taken. And that's what's important. Everything else is just conversation. You have to have the political will and the muscle to sit there and say, they can call me a racist, they can call me a nativist, they can call me a xenophobe, a sexist, a homophobe, all of it. When they get to that name calling, that means they've lost the argument and we're winning. You've got to draw that pus, you've got to lance the boil and draw that pus out of the system. And the conservatives aren't prepared to do that. They'll curl up in the fetal position because they're not going to be acceptable at the clubs. You have to get over, you have to understand we're unclubbable and we're fucking proud of it, okay? And we're going to save our country, and eventually leaders will step up in England and come to the forefront and save the United Kingdom.
Hi, I'm Ann Vandersteel. I want to talk to you a little bit about your health. Part of my daily routine is to get up in the morning and get a little exercise on. If I have time for a mile or 7, doesn't matter. I get out the door every single day. It's important to get my body moving and get that oxygen flowing through my brains. What is also equally important is what I put in my body after I exercise. I rely on vandersteelhealth.com, where I have a delicious selection of superfoods and other supplements. But first and foremost for me are my superfoods. I have a delicious shake every single day. It is organic, all made in the United States of America, non-GMO, never processed before, dehydrated superfoods. And when they reconstitute with water, milk, or whatever juice you like, it makes a delicious, healthy, plant-based protein supplement. And I say supplement because, frankly, I use this as a meal replacement. This is what's helped me lose the last 20 pounds of COVID. I'm back down to my fighting college weight, fitting in my college clothes, and feeling better than ever. So go to vandersteelhealth.com and get your delicious superfoods. Get on the transformation program with us. It's a 30-day kickoff, and it will get your day starting out great. And watch the weight just fall off. Watch the energy increase, the brain fog lift, and of course the ancillary benefits in your hair, skin, and nails. All these things, you are what you eat. Remember that. Go to vandersteelhealth.com. And welcome back to the closing points on Steel News. Yep, we are still in the war zone, but I want to remind everybody, you've heard me talk about the necessity of gold and preserving your wealth. If you're paying attention at all to gold, you're seeing it get on a terror right now. It almost touched 2,800 today, as a matter of fact. And I've, been buying it slowly but steadily over time in the last few years. And I've talked about it a lot, but BRICS is meeting. Brazil, Russia, India, China, South America, South Africa. They're all meeting right now over in Kazan, Russia. And I'm going to show you an X account that I think you should follow. It's BRICS News. But because they are meeting, they are showing us in force how organized they are. And I think what's going to be startling to most Americans is we're now going to be waking up and realizing that the central bankers have been at war with the world. And the reason they pick the fights they do is they want those countries to submit and be part of the central banking system. Remember Hillary Clinton? We came, we saw, he died. That's right. We were talking about when they murdered Gaddafi, because of course he was trying to stand up a gold-backed currency for his country. And, that wasn't going to work well for Libya at all, according to Hillary Clinton and the goon squads from the central bankers. So while we have this election filled with promises and tax cuts and all of this stuff, and of course we want to see President Trump win, is the only candidate that we can put, on the table right now to hope and get us through the next 4 years and start to get this country turned around and deregulate, a la what we were sort of talking about earlier with our guest, Ed Tarpley. We can't let all this excess noise blind us to the fact that we've got to protect ourselves too. This is about us putting on our own oxygen mask before we go to help others. And if we're not making sure our house is in order, not only with food and health, but finances, we are going to be in a bad situation. So while this economic, sort of volatility continues to grow, start to consider where you're going to get gold and how you're going to protect your investment. So if you have IRAs worth over $50,000 or more, and you want to look at a serious player, somebody who will take time over multiple Zoom calls to educate you on the process of buying and holding and owning gold, I highly recommend Augusta Precious Metals. $50,000 or more from Augusta Precious Metals can actually do phenomenal in terms of preserving your wealth and balancing out your portfolio, because I assure you there's going to be a lot more shenanigans. You can either click the link in the description box on my Rumble channel, or you can call them at 888-782-9064. That's 888-782-9064. Secure your free guide to IRA, gold IRAs from Augusta Precious Metals. Give them a call and they'll be happy to walk you through that. And then lastly, I do want to show you this on X, because I did promise this. This is the BRICS site on X. And right now the countries are all in Kazan, Russia, and they are meeting. They also have a Telegram account, but you're looking at world leaders, Xi Jinping, saying that China will undoubtedly develop friendly relationships with Iran during the BRICS summit. We know that the central bankers are looking to gin up war with Iran. They've been poking the bear for quite some time. Again, you're meddling with a country that it has nuclear superpowers behind it now. You've got Russia, India, saying that they're going to support Iran. This is, we got to be really careful here. Russian President Putin says Iran has become a fully fledged member of BRICS. So again, this is a group of countries that represent minimally 40% of the world's GDP and 70% of the world's population coming together. And when you have countries that come together and they stabilize the financial situation between all these countries, you get fair trade. And you know what else you get? You get peace and you get support. This is what Bretton Woods was supposed to do and was supposedly doing, as we weaponized using the dollar's hegemony around the world and just exported inflation so that we could get all of the cheap goods coming into our country. Well, guess what? People are abandoning the dollar, and these nations that are part of BRICS are abandoning the dollar en masse, which is going to create hyperinflation. As all those dollars come home, we're going to have more dollars, and it's going to drive the price of everything up. So folks, if you want to capitalize on the inflation and see your gold values go up, I highly recommend Augusta Precious Metals and get into gold now to protect your family's wealth. And on that note, I'm going to end the show here, because I think it's important that we try to keep these things to an hour. But again, the work that Ed Tarpley's doing and continues to do is the kind of work that you need to do. So please, I encourage you to get to their website. That is the formerfedsgroup.org/SCOTUS-petition. SCOTUS-petition. Please go to formerfedsgroup.org. You can even find the SCOTUS petition on there. You don't have to go to that full URL length, but by all means, please get over there as soon as you possibly can and support what they're doing so that we can actually finally get real elections, because they have consequences. And we're about to find out what the consequence of this election shall be on November 5th. So please get out to vote. Have a great afternoon, everybody. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll catch you next time here on Steel News. Good afternoon.